Okay, so you saw in chapter one, it was a lot of kind of preparing you with all of the terms and kind of giving you an understanding what the terms stand for as far as definitions go, and just kind of getting you prepared for the rest of the textbook. Here in chapter two, we get a little bit more into the meat and potatoes of the actual chapters, of the textbook. And I'm looking down at my notes as I'm chatting with you. I'll do my best to not stare at them constantly. All right, let's start off with talking a little bit about the vision statement. Why is it important to have a quality vision statement? Well, it can help communicate the company's goals to both the employees and management. So this is an important step. As I have highlighted here from the writers of your text, is what they had to say. Strategic leadership is a process of developing a vision for the firm, designing strategic actions to achieve the vision, and empowering others to carry out these strategic actions. And then it goes on to say other major actions involved in the strategic management are developing a management team, management succession, managing the firm's portfolios, resource portfolios, building an entrepreneurial culture, and promoting integrity and ethical behavior. We're going to go over all of those here in just over the next several minutes here. Excuse me. We have lots of smoke at this time of year in the air, and it's just tearing up my sinuses. It doesn't take much to do that anymore. Okay, a mission statement. We just talked about the vision statement. A mission statement. This is a brief statement that summarizes how and where the firm will compete. It's a very, very concise definition there. From the writers, through the vision and through the mission of the firm, strategic leaders inspire their stakeholders, especially your employees, to commit to achieving both of these visions and missions statements that have been put out and strategic plans. This commitment is crucial, it says here in my notes, to effectively implement, because without which value cannot be created by the firm. So they're just talking about, I believe what the writers are trying to get to here is if your employees don't have a strong understanding, and including your management team, of what the mission is, what is required. If I go to a company, let's say at UAF, and I say, what is the mission statement of UAF? A lot of people give me that glazed look, in the eye there. And it's because they really haven't had an opportunity to have someone sit down and kind of go over what is the mission. I mean, they may stop and think, okay, to educate students. Okay, what is the mission? What else do we want to convey? Is there more to the mission than that? And as a management team, it's important for you to be able to not only show the mission statement, but what is the vision of the organization? What is the direction that the organization is going towards, and what are the goals and the objectives that are put in place to get to that point? So I believe that's where they're going here as I'm reading the textbook answer to the following statements. Okay, what else do I want to touch on here? What is a top management team? Well, it says here in my notes, it's a group of managers charged with the responsibility of developing the firm's strategy. But what I really like is that it talks about how this group of managers, it's important that they have different education backgrounds, different experience backgrounds. And you go, well, why is that? Well, think about this, groupthink. When I was teaching critical thinking for the University of Phoenix, this was one of my pet peeves when we were going over groupthink. It says here in my notes, groupthink leads to irrational and dysfunctional decision making. Why? Because everyone is thinking alike. If you have a group that falls into this fallacy of groupthink, then you're going to have somebody who's ever the leader of the group, team leader, whether it be formal or informal, and everybody's going to take that that bobblehead mentality, and they're going to agree. What you really want to have is a team that's made up of experts with their education, their experience backgrounds, and they can really bring into the discussions when you're developing your strategic plans. Your project management teams are putting together their process actions, strategies. So you have someone or someones that step up and go, wait. maybe there's a better way, or maybe there's a more efficient way, or maybe there's a more financially quality way to take the planning. So, anyways, avoid groupthink within your management teams. It's nice never to have anyone to be second guessing you, is how some micromanagers look at it. I don't look at it that way. I find quality managers are oftentimes, not oftentimes, quality managers are very, very open to people's suggestions, and people who bring suggestions in that can support the suggestions because of education and experience. All right, next thing, let's see here. What else I want to touch on here? It says here, why is it important for you as managers? And we're talking about you as executive managers within a company. As we're going through this chapter and going through this textbook, I'm referring to you as executive managers. Because regardless of what company you're going to be involved in, whether it be a small business, an enterprise, or an extremely large firm, I have a feeling not many of you are having aspirations of a lifetime goal of middle management. I have a good, strong feeling that the vast majority want to be executive managers. With that said, moving on. When it comes to succession, again, I'm looking at my notes here. It says in my notes, find that balance between internal and external hiring. Okay, it's important to have some type of succession plan put in place. And part of that is including, how are you going to replace managers? Because eventually everyone moves on. How are you going to replace managers, and what is the strategy that you have? I like to think a good balance between the internal and external. The reason I say that, when you have some internal advancement, people, right, they're pretty excited. They understand that the company uses this as one of its forms for filling its executive levels, and it leads to, oftentimes leads to higher production coming from your middle managers that are hoping to move up. But also, when you're looking at outside, you're bringing in new ideas, fresh ideas that are coming into the organization. Here's what I have from the notes from the textbook, which I thought was kind of a good observation from the writers. It says, as far as bringing in external hires, it has the advantage when a firm in particular is performing in a shoddy performances, i.e., the firm is not performing really well. Well, has groupthink set into the organization? So this might be a great time for you to go as an executive manager. Maybe it's time for me to bring in another executive or upper level middle manager from outside the organization, so they can bring in their dynamics of education and experiences and add it to our team. So I believe that's where they're going when they're talking about preparing for succession within the textbook. Okay, staying here with my notes. This one here, I'm going to read you the definition directly from your text, from the writers of your textbook. It says, in terms of human capital and social capital, what does that mean? Here's what the writers had to say. Human capital includes the knowledge and skills of those working for the firm. Common sense when you hear it, at least it was for me. I would assume for most of you out there, if not all of you. And then social capital includes all the internal and external relationships that help that firm provide value to customers and ultimately to other stakeholders. Simply stated, and I think there's probably no blurring of the definition from that overview. When it comes to entrepreneurial culture, now, for those of you who've had my classes in the past, you know that I'm extremely involved in small business startups as a SCORE mentor, the Alaska chair now for SCORE, teaching entrepreneurship classes and small business management classes. I have a passion, and throw in there as a former director of the Small Business Development Center. I have a passion when it comes to working with small businesses. I just enjoy being around that entrepreneurial culture. Well, can that entrepreneurial culture be brought into a larger organization, let's say a mid-size, like in the enterprise term that I'd like to use for the kind of the middle of the group as far as size for business, and then of course you have your large corporations. Yeah, I think it does. And here's for some of the things the writers brought up. Why it's important to consider adopting the entrepreneurial culture within your organization. Now, for those of you who have already had behavior, organizational behavior was, I forget I think it's BA390 here. You remember that there was the clan and culture, and there was the of course, the entrepreneurial and the marketing, and then one it was very authoritative in its makeup. I really like the entrepreneurial. Marketing would probably be my second favorite culture to introduce to an organization. But staying with this class, the reason the writers of this textbook like the entrepreneurial culture is it says it encourages creativity, it encourages your workers to do some risk taking, and it also tolerates failure. If you have an organization where the Queen of Hearts is running around and taking people's heads off, that's the management style that's in place. If they make a mistake, then people just won't move from point A to point B without the micromanagers, the Queen of Hearts coming in and telling them exactly what to do, because they don't want to be having their heads, and this is not literally, figuratively, cut off. So think about that. When you're looking at that thought process as executive managers, bring in an entrepreneurial. I like to call it intrapreneurs for the businesses. And I explain to my students in my entrepreneurship class the biggest difference between an entrepreneur and an intrapreneur is the entrepreneur in a small business is the risk taking is their own money. In a large business, the risk taking is the firm's money. So there is the qualities of the creativity and the innovation, but when it comes to the risk taking with the finances, sometimes the entrepreneurs have to be reminded that you're taking these risks with company dollars. So there may be a little bit more scrutiny if when you're asking for permission for those funds, or if you had any setbacks. Anyways, it says here in my notes, the entrepreneurial culture is valuable to a firm because it has major effects on employees' actions, profitability, and can increase chances of success. I like that last part. I liked all of it, but in particular that last part. An organization is in business to be successful, whether it be a for-profit or a non-profit. It's in business to be successful. All right, I think I've got that point across with entrepreneurial. What else I want to touch on here? It went over into chapter 2 about how it's important to have highly ethical standards, and to make sure that those code of ethics for all employees, including your executive managers, are well understood. From the HR and the hiring process to the training, what that's going on within the organization, to the what's the word I'm looking for, to the reinforcement of the importance of having high standards and not tolerating unethical behavior, because unethical behavior leads to it could lead to employees their morale being affected in a negative way. It could lead to the organization's financial bottom line being affected in a negative way. And it talked about in extraordinary cases, it can even lead to the end determination of the business itself. Okay. I mean, think about the lawsuits you hear from some of these companies have to deal with because they had employees who went rogue, were unethical, and really created a lot of turmoil for a company. Of course, the one that people love to bring up because it was on such a large scale that it did lead to the end of a mega corporation. And of course, we're talking about Enron. Okay. What else do I want to touch on before we wrap this up? Oh, I talked about controlling your financial outcomes in this last chapter. In this chapter 2. Controlling financial outcome, it says here, is important, while at the same time looking at the longer term and evaluating the content of the strategic use. So it's always important for you as managers, as I was kind of talking about a few minutes ago with the entrepreneur. Always important for you to do the scrutiny of how the dollars are being spent. Maybe you don't need to itemize every single step, that one of your managers are getting ready to take, but at least get a good overview of what the money's being spent on. You know, that you don't need to know right down to the number 2 pencils that they're buying, but maybe it would be important to know if they're planning on buying a $65,000 piece of equipment. You know, I remember I was working in one organization that was medical, and the IT went out and spent, and this is many moons ago, and they went out and spent like $10,000 on this fancy printer. And we were all in the organization go, what in the world do they need that for? And they didn't. They had a budget, and they kind of, those that were in charge of their budget for that particular department kind of abused their budget. They went out and spent that money on something that really didn't have an impact on how proficient and how the quality offering of the organization was not impacted at all. It was just, it seemed like a waste of money to 99% of us outside of that one department. Okay, well, that's chapter 2. As you can see, for weeks 2 and 3, you'll be concentrating on chapter 2, whether it be doing your video or doing your assessment of other videos. So that's what's going to be going on for the next couple of weeks. All right, if you have any questions, get a hold of me. Bye.